Buonasera, bentornati per Liberi Oltre Confine. Oggi parliamo delle elezioni in Perù. Elezioni che sono problematiche per quel paese, all'apparenza lontane da noi, ma in realtà per chi si occupa per esempio del populismo e dei confronti che ci sono tra prospettive populiste e prospettive liberali, in realtà queste elezioni saranno molto importanti. La storia politica del Perù negli ultimi 30 anni è stata travagliata con tanti momenti di speranza e anche con momenti invece nei quali si è temuto per la tenuta stessa della democrazia. Ne parliamo oggi con un amico, con Enrique Ghersi, che è di Albissola Marina, come dice lui, vicino a Savona. No, Enrique è un importante avvocato e professore di diritto a Lima. È stato tra gli autori dell'Otro Sendero, questo libro che è scritto assieme a Hernando de Soto con prefazione di Mario Vargas Llosa, che rispondeva per l'appunto a Sendero Luminoso e cominciava a mettere a fuoco la possibilità, l'importanza di trascendere i diritti di proprietà formali in un paese come il Perù, andando a cercare invece qual era l'ostacolo allo sviluppo nel fatto che i diritti di proprietà della gente non avevano una sanzione formale, un tema su quale poi De Soto è tornato anche nel suo libro successivo, Il mistero del capitale. Enrique è anche uno studioso, un appassionato di Bruno Leoni, cosa che a me fa molto piacere, e ha accettato di spiegarci un po' come il Perù è arrivato in questa strana situazione. Parleremo in inglese. Enrique, first of all, thanks a lot for being with us today. May I ask you if you could kindly give us, an overview of these strange election in Peru, because, of course, the last time Peru elected PPK, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who was some kind of an equivalent of Mario Monti for Peru, if I understand well, a technocratic candidate with some liberal leanings. This time, instead, the election landscape is really, really different. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much if you may, give us a picture of what's going on.
Thank you very much, dear Alberto. For me, it's really a great pleasure to be with all of you. Regretfully, I don't speak Italian, so even though my grandfather was from Albissola Marina, as Alberto remember, I am just a Peruvian, so I can't transmit my ideas in Italian as I would love to do. Second, yes, indeed, this is a very particular election, but in some sense, because one of the candidates is not a surprise. I'm speaking of Mrs. Keiko Fujimori. In fact, Keiko, it is the third time that she get in the second round. So it is the first case in Peruvian history that one candidate arrives 3 times consecutively to the second round. In Peru, as it is important to remark, we have a presidential system, not a parliamentary one, like in Italy. And second, we have the French style of presidential system. In other words, the worst of all the presidential models, because it has some elements of the parliamentarian system and some elements of the presidential system. From France, Peruvian constitutional laws took the idea of elect a president in 2 rounds. So we are in the second one, and Keiko is in the second one for the 3rd time consecutively. It was in 2011, 2016, and now 2021. So that is not a surprise. That is because she's the daughter of the last dictator, Alberto Fujimori, who was elected democratically in 1990. He won to Mario Vargas Llosa, our friend and a defensor of the liberties. But he changed in 1992. He made a coup d'etat, dissolved illegally the Congress, and took the power with an iron fist for the coming years. Keiko was a little girl during that time, but in some moment of the government of his father, their fathers got divorced. So at the age of 19 years old, Alberto Fujimori appointed her as the first lady of Peru. So she is, in some sense, in the highness of the power since very young. So she, in spite she has 42 today, she's still a very young lady. She's in power or around the power or in the vicinities of the power from some decades in Peru. So that is not a surprise. Fujimorism is a political movement that exists in Peru. Mostly it's a kind of populist right, that uses the figure of Alberto Fujimori, the old president who is in prison today, serving a life sentence, and for some different accusations. But his party and the group around him exist, and is a very important part of the population. So Keiko Fujimori is representing them. It's not the same figure. Alberto Fujimori was a kind of Latin American caudillo, in spite of his Japanese name, was mostly a very Latin American president. And Keiko Fujimori develops a new kind of Fujimorism, more technocratic, less populist, and trying to emphasize a lot, especially for the actual circumstance, the fact that she's a woman in front of the current candidate, the front leader, that he is accused of machista, in Peru. That is not a surprise.
For a second. In a way, it's a very different situation than when Fujimori appeared on the scene, because if I remember correctly, Fujimori was basically unknown before the second round, when he ran against Mario Vargas Llosa, and you were one really of the engine of Movimiento Libertad, of Vargas Llosa's movement. And if I remember correctly, all of you were kind of surprised and amazed by the fact that this man was coming out of nothing and scoring better than the apristas, for example. Instead, Keiko has been part of Peruvian politics basically forever.
Yes, true, totally true. And in fact, in 2016, the last election that you remember, in which PPK, we call Pedro Pablo Kuczynski PPK, who is an old politician since the times of the first government of Fernando Belaúnde in the 60s. He is more than 80 years old. She lost the election in 2016 for just 40,000 votes in a country of 35 million persons. That is a whisper, as you probably remember. In the last election, 2016, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski won the presidency, but Keiko won the Congress. And that was the beginning of the problem of Keiko Fujimori as a politician. Normally, being both of the right wing, Kuczynski, some kind of technocratical, so liberal in classical terms, president. No, he was a student of Isaiah Berlin, London. He has some classical liberal tradition. But the Congress, led by the Fujimori party, Fuerza Popular, is the populist right. It could be possible to make an arrangement, an ally, explicit or implicitly, and let Kuczynski govern. But that does not occur. And Keiko Fujimori, instead of that, preferred to go ahead against PPK, especially in some allegations, some accusations against him for being part of a very Latin American scandal around Brazilians constructing enterprises, mainly Odebrecht and so on. So that came with the impeachment of PPK, and he was overthrown. He resigned before the Congress overthrew him, and the vice president Vizcarra, at that time a close ally of Keiko Fujimori, took the power. But being a very good disciple of Machiavelli, Vizcarra turned around and put in jail Keiko Fujimori 3 times. And that is mainly the problem of Keiko today. She was accused of illegal funding in her campaign, and he has a lot of problems with the judiciary now. A lot of judges, a lot of procedures. She has not been condemned in any case, but she is accused. There is a prosecutor here that is asking 30 years against the candidate. So it could be the first case, I think, in the world in which, if she wins, she is confronting 30 years accusation of jail from the prosecutors. No, but according with the Peruvian constitution, if you are president, you are immune. So everything will be suspended until Keiko Fujimori ends her government. In the other side is Professor Pedro Castillo. Pedro Castillo is basically an unknown union leader, one of the union leaders of the teachers union in Peru, which is called SUTEP, Sindicato Único de Trabajadores de la Educación Peruana, the union of the school teachers. No, which is very powerful. That kind of union in South America, in general, in Latin America, are very powerful. In Mexico, the union of teachers put the president is always very powerful. In Peru, it is also. But the union of teachers, of school teachers, SUTEP, is divided in Peru. It's mostly in the hands, since the beginning of the times of the existence of that union, in the hands of a group called Partido Comunista del Perú, Patria Roja, which means Communist Party of Peru, Red Highland. But they are Maoist, but adjourned Maoist. No, Patria Roja is not an anti-systemic party. They are part of Peruvian politics. They had, today they have not, but they had representation in the Congress and a lot of influences in certain moments of Peruvian history. But inside the union, there were a division, and there is a group, this is very, very Maoist, called Comisión Nacional de Reconstrucción, National Commission of Reconstruction. It means reconstruction of the union, that makes a division of the union. And the leader of that group, headed by the former militants of the Shining Path movement, is Professor Castillo. Castillo appears in 2017 during the PPK government for a strike, a very important strike against the government in that moment. So his only political backgrounds are around that strike, and mostly as a union leader. During the campaign, he was a surprise in the first round because the candidates of the traditional left were declining in the preferences of the voters, and Verónica Mendoza, the mayor of La Victoria, a neighborhood in Peru, in Lima, George Forsyth, and Julio Guzmán, the candidate of some kind of socialist party in Peru, will disappearing progressively and appears as a bold the candidacy of Pedro Castillo by the extreme left. In the first round, Castillo has gotten a very little quantity of votes because of a distortion in the Peruvian system. We had 22 candidates for the presidency. 22, I think, not even in Italy you have that candidate, that quantity of parties. The amount that Castillo got in the first round was just 13% of the votes, but for a distortion of a Peruvian system that talks about the difference between the votes and the valid votes, that means around 20% of the total cast. And in the other hand, Keiko Fujimori got less than 10%, but with the same system of electoral quotation, she got around 13% of the population. So the two candidates running for the presidency now, in the first round, got a minimum support. They are not candidates preferred for the vast majority of the Peruvians. In fact, they are the first minorities coming to the second round. That's the problem with the system of two rounds, French style. Today, Castillo, is not legal in Peru. The last week, present any polls, but everybody knows, because I allow with the net, you know, this prohibition is totally ridiculous, because the enterprises who made the polls give it to the international press, and it appears in the web. So it's stupid to have that kind of prohibition in the modern world. But mostly what we know today, it could change, because in Peru, the people decide in the queue for in the queue.
Yes.
In the queue, the people is very, very changing, and there is volatility. No. There's no lead. There's no loyalty in the electors. But today it's tied. It's too tight to call. No, it's very close, both of them. Keiko, which is important, is the movement. Keiko is growing little by little, slowly growing, and Professor Castillo is mostly in the same position. We have some elements could distort the results. First, that the polls in Peru not include the Peruvians over 70 years old. That is very criticized, but the enterprises shield themselves, saying that the law says that over 70 is not obligatory to vote, so they don't ask them. But this is stupid, because they distort the general opinion of Peruvians. Peru is a young country. It's not like Europe, no. But the senior citizens in Peru are 3 million in an electoral population of 22. That is more than 10%.
Yeah.
So that could change totally the election, and it's not the same proportion inside that quarter of population. The people has not the same ideology and the same form of thinking that the young people in Peru. So what the observers think is the senior citizens could make the difference because they are more conservative and they live the times of shining path. Today, Castillo says, I am not a senderista, I am not of the shining path. That is true because he's a young gentleman. He's too young. In the times of the shining path in the 80s and 90s, he was in the school, so it's impossible to link him with nothing real about Abimael Guzman or the shining path. But it is clear that today, Sendero has a new forms of operation. Sendero today, at least until now, is not formally in arms. They are not making attacks on nothing. Nevertheless, there is a group in the jungle that never deposed the arms, the weapons, and they made an attack the last week. You know?
May you remind us what were the somehow the differences? I mean, what was peculiar of Sendero Luminoso, of the Shining Path, in terms of its revolutionary creed? I mean, to what extent that was different and peculiar vis-a-vis other revolutionary Marxist-like movements around the world?
It is very interesting, the history of the Shining Path. In fact, they are not accept the name of Shining Path. The press put this nickname to them. The history is as follows. Peruvian communism, as a reflection of what was going on with the communism around the world, divide itself. No? Let me explain you. The old Communist Party of Peru, no? Partido Comunista Peruano, was founded by a commissar of Stalin during the Spanish Civil War called Eudosio Rabines, that less was a defector and a very important champion of liberty. You know, his book, The Yunnan Way, was a bestseller in the 50s. But the old Communist Party of Peru was Stalinist, Muscovite obedience. When Mao fight with Stalin, the Peruvian party, the Peruvian Communist Party, divided as a result, as a reflection of that international division. And appears the Peruvian Communist Party and the old one, the traditional, the Stalinist, and its division was called Peruvian Communist Party of Peru. Partido Comunista Peruano was the Stalinist, and Partido Comunista del Perú, just a play of words, no, was the Maoist. The old Stalinist party, Partido Comunista Peruano, the Peruvian Communist Party, has divided in two. All the classicals that keep the Stalinist position was called Communist Party, Peruvian Communist Party, Unidad, Partido Comunista Peruano Unidad, the Stalinist, the old ones of ever. No, they exist until today and are very powerful in the Central General de Trabajadores del Perú, in the Confederation of Unions. And the second group is a Peruvian Communist Party, Partido Comunista Peruano, mayoría. which is a group of so-called intellectuals of cafeteria that made speeches at the university and nothing more. In the case of the Maoist, no, Partido Comunista del Perú, Communist Party of Peru, it divides. When Mao fight with Enver Hoxha, the former leader of Albania, the Albanese radical sector. So in Peru, this is ridiculous, but nobody knows what's Albania. The Maoists divided. No, the Communist Party of Peru, Patria Roja, that I already mentioned, who control the majority of the professors of the School Professors Union, and the Albanese faction, which is a Communist Party of Peru, red flag. One is Red Highlands, Patria Roja, and the other one is Red Flag, Bandera Roja. No? When Enver Hoxha fights with Pol Pot, the leader of the genocide leader of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the Communist Party of Peru, Red Flag, divided. It's a meiosis, like in the cells. It's unbelievable, no? And creates the Communist Party of Peru, Bandera Roja, who still exists, is Albanese. Is not more Albanian communists, but they are Albanese. They believe in the Hoxha until today. And the other group is called the Communist Party of Peru by the shining path of Mariátegui. No, it's a lemma of the party. No, but that leads us to another question. Who is Mariátegui? Mariátegui, José Carlos Mariátegui, was the founder of the Socialist Party in the 20s. He was a Gramsci disciple, and he studied in Italy. He died very young, and he was the founder of, at least intellectually, of the socialism of communism in Peru, not of the Communist Party, which was Eudosio Rabines, but he has a lot of intellectual influence because he published a very famous book called Seven Essays about the Peruvian reality. So the Shining Path, which is the nickname that the press put to the moment, to that movement, because, you know, Communist Party of Peru by the shining path of Mariátegui is impossible to reproduce in the press. The press put them shining path, like a yogi movement or something like that. Now, so they hate the name. But in the 80s, they start the popular war of liberation, as they call, in 1980 against President Fernando Belaúnde Terry. And they were militarily defeated in 1992 by Alberto Fujimori when the police captured the Central Committee of the party without shooting a gun, and particularly the leader, the maximum leader of the movement, called Abimael Guzman, a philosopher professor, which is in jail since now until today. It is really a paradox that 40 years after its military defect, the Shining Path, the followers of the Shining Path, the neo-senderistas, could win an election democratically in Peru, because Professor Castillo is representing the same kind of ideas: agrarian communism against the life in the cities. He's saying in the meetings that the problem of crime in Peru is because the people is not working. So it's necessary to give to take the young people to the highlands in order to be cattle of cows and llamas, no, and that would change the spirit that perverted the capitalist spirit of the Peruvians. That sounds very like Cambodia in the times of Pol Pot. So this Sunday we have a very particular election. Keiko Fujimori is not a surprise. It's more or less the same, and this is her main problem. And this Professor Castillo, which is coming from the highlands, which is a professor in a little town in the north of Peru, in a province called Cajamarca, and that represent a very aggressive Maoist, radical Maoism. They're in favor of the Gang of Shanghai, not in favor of Deng Xiaoping. This is not the capitalist Maoism that we know in the more China. This is the old Maoism in the reframe with naturalism, ambientalism, the new narrative that the left wing is using all around the world. Of course,
go back to nature.
Yes, go back to nature. And the pandemics, you know, help a lot because, you know, all the policies that the state used against the COVID, the coronavirus is the trigger of this kind of moments, movement,
also,
because
the people in Peru has been very high,
and the people has fear, no? So the state is the only guy that could save you. That is the argument, no? But mostly that is the situation, Alberto.
Enrique, this picture of the sectarianism within Peruvian communism is fascinating. It reminds me of actually a very beautiful novel by Mario Vargas Llosa, Storia di Maita.
Of course.
A magnificent one. But you described Castillo as a rural candidate. Isn't Fujimorismo a rural movement too? So
no, never was. Alberto Fujimori has himself a lot of support during his government because it's his policies, mostly populist policies, that make a lot of redistribution and social programs of helping people, distributing food and stamps and a lot of things, and building schools in the rural towns. But Keiko's style of Fujimorism is mostly citadine and technocratic. No, she's an urban candidate. She's a young urban lady, no, that is running for the presidency.
People in Lima will vote for her.
She is winning in Lima by a very important difference. Lima has the majority of the population of Peru, but what is important is to know that mostly it is very particular because it remembers some kind of Pareto's observation. The key cipher is 60-40. No 80-20, 60-40. In Peru, the rural population is 40, and the urban population is 60-40. If you take the urban population, it's 60-40. 60 for Keiko, 40 for the professor. And in the rural population, that 40% is the reverse. 60 for the professor and 40 for Keiko Fujimori. So the decision, the south of Peru is very leftist, always was. It's not a new phenomenon. The battle is in the north, because in the first round, the North traditional, the north of Peru, which is especially the coast, votes always for the right wing, because it's the Peruvian California, no, the north of Peru, or Peruvian Texas, if you want, because they have oil, they have wonderful production of agriculture. Peru produces a lot of fruit, or asparagus for the world. Is really the richest part of Peru is the north, the coast, the north of the Peruvian coast. Traditionally, they vote right, but in the highlands of the north, no, Castillo is winning. And that is exactly the place in which the campaign in this second term is having the most intensity, because apparently Keiko is retaking the highlands in the north of Peru. If that happens, Keiko can win by a whisper. This election will be 1% or less. No, as I mentioned, in 2016, PPK won for 40,000 people. That's nothing. Yes. No, that could happen today. No.
Well, there was a famous election in Italy when Romano Prodi won over Silvio Berlusconi, not in a presidential system, clearly, but there were 30,000 votes that really matter in a country like ours. But I'm taking too much of your time, but let me just ask you two final questions to you as a legal scholar. The first one is, in your studies, in the work you've done, you pointed out that one of the biggest problem was the fact that you got lots of economic activity in Peru on the one hand, but very little access to the legal system available to poor people. So, poor people thrive and exchange and try to build something, but eventually, since formal property rights are going in the opposite direction, it's impossible to have capital formation and development. Is that still true after these many years and some precedents that actually should have known better? And the second question is, if you think about the Peruvian constitution and the possibility that il maestro or la hija de Fujimori may win this Sunday, is the legal system strong enough to constrain the president and make it impossible to basically trump over individual rights? Forever.
Very good, very interesting question, both of them. First, regretfully, our legal system is still so costly for the people. No, the problem is that the politician thinks that the law is free, and the law is not free. There is no free lunch, even in the case of the law. And there is a market of rules in all societies. So if the law is so costly that the people can't comply with, they displace the source of the rules from the state to the society. Instead to comply with the laws, the people comply with their customs. And nevertheless, being a country, in theory, from a positivistic point of view, a country with a civil code and laws, written laws, the people is acting against the law, but guiding themselves by different customs and convert the country in a common law country. That's what happens mostly in Latin America, because the people are working in the informal sector. In legal terms, informal sector means that the majority of the people is not complying with the laws. And that signifies not that the people is wrong, but that the law is wrong. because if the law is so costly that the majority of the people can comply with, it is necessary to change the law, not to change the people. In Peru, we have, nobody knows exactly the last years because this is hidden and the central bank has not present figures about this, but we scholars suspect that it is between 70 or 80% of the population working outside the law in the informal sector. Even though Peruvian has had a very good ciphers, a very good numbers in the economic field until the pandemics, and because that, I think Peru resists the pandemics, because in the formal sector, the people is working the same as before the pandemics. So there is a pending task in order to reform and modernize our legal system. The same is in Chile. Chile and Peru has confront the same problem, and Chile did the things even better than Peru. But Chile has exactly the same problem, even worse, because Chile has fallen. Chile, in this moment, they already have a constituyente, asamblea constituyente, a kind of Congress that redacts write the new constitution, which is totally in the hands of the left wing. So in the case of Peru, that not happened yet, no? And the front runner candidate in Chile is the Secretary General of the Communist Party of Chile. That could be unbelievable for the Chileans some years ago, but this is a reality today. It is necessary to confront for the next future an important change in institutions, because we have a non-efficient and illegitimate law in South America. The principal problem is the lack of legitimacy of the institutional legal system in Peru, and probably all around Latin America, that we compart that kind of problems. The second one, for Keiko Fujimori, the law is a contention. Keiko Fujimori, if she wins, she will not make any attention against the constitution or against the law. In the case of the constitution, because it's her father, the constitution, so she is very proud of the constitution. And there are some reasons for being proud, because Peruvian prosperity in part is because we have a very liberal, classical liberal economic chapter in the Peruvian constitution. But in for the case of Castillo, it is clear that one Maoist will not respect the legalidad burguesa, no? The bourgeois legality will not stop a Maoist. The power comes from the rifles, says Mao, not from the constitution. You conquest the power, not win the power. So for the Maoist, a constitutional law is just part of the capitalist system that it is necessary to discard. The problem for the Castillo will be not the laws, will be the army, because the army fought against terrorism in Peru, and the generals, the commands, the principal officers today are veterans of that war. And so there are pending conflicts between them. The old senderistas hate the generals and the admirals because they confront in the battlefield. It's not a poem. They bleed together. So this is a particular circumstance that could restrain Castillo, because I don't see that Castillo changing the army, because he has not power to do that. and probably the army that in Peru, in South America in general, has a very important influence, will resist any illegal or constitutional attempt of one president. So it is more than a legal constraint, a factual constraint that could be a limit for the powers of Castillo. But it is in order to see, you know, if a president wins election for 2,000 votes, it's totally different than if he wins for 20%. And no, it's totally different. So it is necessary to see, wait and see, and with a hope that the democracy could win this Sunday in Lima.
Well, Enrique, thank you so much. It's in many ways a very sad election you're going to go through, but it's been a great conversation. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto.
Grazie
It
mille.
was great to talk to you.